Okay, so let's talk about it. DEVON Franklin and Meagan Good are getting a divorce. I don't really want to talk so much about them and their marriage, but I want to talk about marriage, and especially if you're single. 8 things come to mind as I thought about DEVON and Meagan, and as I read comments that people were saying, right? People are angry. People are hurt, right? Because they've seemed to have put themselves into the hope of DEVON and Meagan Good instead of their hope in Christ. So let's talk about it. 8 things. Number 1, there's never a guarantee that a marriage, no matter who it is, won't end in divorce. I know, it sounds discouraging, right? But I'm not saying it to be discouraging. I'm saying it because it's really the truth. Hear me out. I'm sure when DEVON and Meagan sat down to do that Oprah interview, they had no idea that one day they'd be getting a divorce. When you listen to that interview, they're in love. Meagan met the one. DEVON has met the one, right? The truth is, when couples enter into marriage, no one goes into it thinking, okay, one day we're going to get a divorce. Nobody thinks like that, right? And I don't want this point to be discouraging, but in reality, because you have 2 imperfect people entering into a union, you just never know what can happen. And that's why I say there's never a guarantee that marriage won't end in divorce. You can't control what the other person does. You can only control yourself. So with that said, you can't guarantee that marriage won't end in divorce. However, you can enter into marriage with both people committing that divorce is not an option, right? But even with that said, you never know what can happen. My husband and I have been married 22 years now, and it's certainly not because we're perfect, and it's certainly not because we did all the right things. It's the grace of God. Number 2, marriage isn't a fairy tale. I'd seen that Oprah interview with DEVON and Meagan before, and even then it did seem a little bit too good to be true, maybe kind of fairy tale-ish. But, you know, I think even myself, when I met my husband and we dated, I mean, it might have sounded a little bit fairy tale-ish too. However, marriage stories are beautiful. The gazing into each other's eyes and how you wait before marriage and all of that. But you know, if your dating experience doesn't include some challenges, maybe some things you found out about the other person that may not be so pleasant, you know, if they don't include some tough times, then I'm not sure that it's reality, right? Because dating life is a lot different than married life. And so we really have to be careful about going into marriage with fairy tale thinking. Point number 3, a successful Christian marriage is about being surrendered to Christ, not your career, not the other person, not yourself, not your kids, but it's about being surrendered to God first. People magazine said of DEVON and Meagan that the split was a long time coming because they haven't been spending a lot of time together this year. You know, I follow DEVON on Instagram, and I know that he had been sharing that he was doing a couple of films and some TV shows. And I believe too that his wife was filming some new shows with her being an actress, him a producer. But perhaps they were more surrendered to their careers instead of each other in the marriage, right? I had one time read where Matt Damon, he's an actor and he's been married to his wife for 16 years. I'm sure they don't have a perfect marriage either. I'm not bringing that up because they do. But I liked one thing he said. He said that they have a rule that he won't spend more than 2 weeks away from his wife and the family when he's shooting a film. And I think that's what you have to do when you're married. You really have to make those kinds of decisions. You have to be sure to protect your relationship in the marriage at all costs. Okay, point number 4. Support your spouse's dreams, but definitely speak up if it's affecting you or the marriage. In other words, don't pretend everything's okay when it's not. DEVON seemed to have been supportive of his wife's career, and that's awesome. I love to see a man who supports his wife's dreams, but maybe to a fault. And I'm talking about this. In an interview MEAGAN did, she was asked how her husband was able to deal with her, or what he thought of her doing sex scenes, with him being a strong Christian and all. And you know, she's supposed to be a Christian too, right? Well, her response was this: you know what's interesting about him? I'll call him and I'll be like, honey, I'm about to do this sex scene. And he'll be like, okay, well, just make it look real, because you really want the audience to root for you. You want them to care about the relationship. That's what's going to drive the movie through. So he's like, just get into it. Now, I don't know about you, but I know for me, I would find it hard to watch my husband, if he were an actor, kissing and doing sex scenes with someone in a film. I think in order for DEVON to have supported his wife in that way, I believe that he would have had to detach himself from his true feelings, from his true emotions. He seems to be the type of person who is ultra positive, and he wants to support his wife no matter what. I don't think he wanted to come across as a judgmental Christian, right? And I think he just wanted to be supportive. So he needed to detach himself in order to do that. But I think that's a dangerous thing to do. I know for me, I'm married, and I look to my husband to give me the truth, right? And I hope that he looks to me to give him the truth when you are in a marriage. You do want to be supportive, but you also want to be honest and truthful. I know for me, there was a time when I had to tell my husband the truth about something. I mean, it was nothing like this where there's sex scenes or anything like that, but we had come out of a 3-year time at a church where my husband had taken a job there, and my husband wanted to move directly into something else. And he wanted to be involved in this marriage ministry. And it would have involved me because it was a marriage ministry, right? But we had just come out of one, for me personally, it was a very spiritually draining ordeal. And when God is doing a work in you, I know for me, when God is doing a work in me, it's draining. We had come out of that. And then my husband is the type of person where he's a doer, you know, so he wanted to go right into something else. I went on and I thought, okay, well, I'll do it, you know, but no sooner than a couple of weeks in, I prayed about it and I knew, you know what, I'm not going to be able to do this. And in order for me to pull out, he would have to pull out of it as well, because it involved both of us. So I had to tell him, babe, I can't do this. I knew that God was not calling me to do this. And if he wasn't calling me to do it, he wasn't calling my husband to do it either, right? Because it was a joint thing. And so, of course, now, years later, he looks back and of course, he appreciates the fact that I was honest. You know, he might have been disappointed at the time that we weren't going to do that. But, you know, I think that honesty about whatever your feelings are or however you believe God is speaking to you, you're speaking that into your spouse and into your marriage. It's to benefit both of you, right? And so never pretend that everything's okay when it's really not okay. Be supportive, but be honest. Number 5, have the same foundational values. We know this as, in the Bible, as being equally yoked. When DEVON and MEAGAN met, DEVON had been walking with the Lord for many years. He'd been celibate for years. He was grounded in his faith. MEAGAN had just come out of a bad relationship. She'd been hurt in other relationships, and she had decided just before she met DEVON that she was going to be celibate. And as she tells it in the Oprah interview, when she saw DEVON on a movie set, she felt that he'd be her husband. She wanted someone like him, someone who wouldn't hurt her. MEAGAN said that she comes from a very liberal background where anything goes. On the other hand, DEVON came from a very conservative background where anything didn't go, right? So it's just really important that when you're dating, look for someone who has the same foundational values. Point number 6, respect physical intimacy as sacred. Now, of course, this goes without saying, but physical intimacy is to be reserved for two people in marriage. We know that Megan and DEVON started out with physical intimacy being sacred, or they seem to, because they waited until they got married. However, as I mentioned in one of the previous points, is that when it came to doing sex scenes, it was another story. Two actors who refused to do kissing or sex scenes in a movie are Kirk Cameron and Neil McDonough. In the movie Fireproof, Kirk Cameron had his own wife replace his on-screen wife for a brief kissing scene so he wouldn't be kissing someone else. And the actor Neil McDonough says his lips are meant for one woman only, his wife, of course. He was even fired once for refusing to do a sex scene. You know, when a married actor kisses another one in a scene, they're really taking a risk. They're risking that they might feel something for someone that should only be reserved for your spouse. Remember Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie? Point number 7, there's no such thing as a perfect couple. So many people are hurt and angry and just have all kinds of feelings about this news about DEVON and Megan. Now, of course it's sad that they're getting a divorce. But if you read some of the comments on their Instagram, my goodness, some people have just elevated them to a status that they never should have been elevated to in the first place. One commenter wrote, "Well, back to premarital sex for me. Why stop having premarital sex if this is the outcome?" Another woman with over-the-top anger wrote that he should take all his books off the shelves. She seemed duped that he'd come to her church to speak. No matter what a couple looks like on the outside, no matter how many books they've written, how wonderful they look together, they don't belong on a perfect pedestal, right? You don't know what's going on behind the scenes. The only one that belongs on a perfect pedestal is Jesus. Number 8, divorce is often likened to a death. On DEVON and Megan's Instagram page, it says, "After much prayer and consideration, we have decided to go into our futures separately, but forever connected. We celebrate almost a decade of marriage together and a love that is eternal. There was no one at fault. We believe this is the next best chapter in the evolution of our love. We are incredibly grateful for the life-changing years we've spent together as husband and wife. We are also extremely thankful to God for the testimony being created inside us both and for blessing our lives with each other." Clearly, that is a well-crafted statement. It doesn't at all represent what a human heart goes through when it's going through a divorce. I hope for their sakes, though, that they do take the time to grieve this loss. And overall, what I want to say is it comes back to the fact that there is no guarantee that a marriage won't end in divorce. However, when two people are committed to the relationship, when two people in Christ are surrendered to Christ, it can work. But it takes two. Actually, 3. You, him, and him.